Last video, we talked about what happened in a pastor's office, about a woman who was told to stay in an abusive marriage and submit sexually to her abuser, and about how that wasn't biblical counseling, but it was actually spiritual abuse. This week, I want to talk a little bit about what happens afterward, because if you reported your abuser, or you told someone, or you watched the story break and waited for the institution to do the right thing and nothing happened, I want to talk to you about that wait because I think it can keep us sick. I'm William Hemphill, and I'm a licensed therapist, and I've also spent 14 plus years in pastoral ministry. And I've sat with survivors of spiritual abuse. One of the questions I get most often, not in these exact words, but in the shape of some version of, when is he going to be held accountable? When is the truth going to come out? When is God going to deal with what this person did? Maybe you reported them, the denomination did nothing. Maybe you told the board of the church and they closed ranks. Maybe you watched the person get promoted instead of disciplined. Maybe they got a bigger platform. Maybe he got a book deal. Maybe they got applauded by people who should have known better. And every Sunday they are still in that pulpit. And every Sunday, part of you wonders, when is this going to land? When is God's judgment going to show up? When will God do the things that the institutions or the elders or the deacons or others won't do? Underneath that weight is a trap. The trap is this, that you have started to believe that your healing depends on their fall. I want to pause that for a moment because it's a sneaky trap. We believe that our healing depends on their fall. We might not say it that way, but somewhere in the back of our nervous system, we've tied strings between two things that actually don't belong together. We've tied our recovery to their accountability. And as long as that string is tied, we can't fully heal because that person who did the abuse, the clergy who may have advocated the abuse, the clergy who may have harmed, they're not within our reach. The institution that protected is not within our reach. The board, the denomination, the donors, the followers, none of that is within our reach, which simply means this: as long as our healing depends on their fall, our healing is being held hostage by people who may not have our well-being in mind. This is not a recipe for getting better. It's actually a recipe for saying stuck. Now, I do want to be careful in saying this. I am not telling you to forget what happened. And I am not stating that accountability does not matter, because accountability does. Many times when we advocate by writing the letters, by reporting to institutions, by bearing witness, by telling stories, we're not advocating just for us, we're advocating for the next victim. And so I like to say, if we can advocate, do advocate safety, be a witness, tell the story, whatever it might be. But do them because they are right and not because our healing is waiting on the outcome. Because here's what I've seen over and over again. Survivors who tie their healing to accountability often live by the news cycle. The story breaks and you may have a good week. The clergy person releases a statement denying abuse. You have a terrible week. The denomination launches an investigation. There's hope in another good week. The investigation might close with no action. Then comes despair. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Nervous system has been wired to somebody who's not earned the right to determine our days. And meanwhile, the slow, daily, unglamorous work of healing, rebuilding ourselves, repairing our connection to God and an image of God, learning that our bodies are ours again, sits on the floor untouched because of the emotional energy waiting to see when judgment might come for somebody else. I want to state a sobering truth to us. That person, the one who harmed the clergy in clothes, who gave the harmful advice, or who may have done something harmful, they may never fall. They may retire from that pulpit. Heck, they might even get a wing of a seminary or a college named after them. They can get a podcast deal and a tour bus. Here's the truth. Even if it does come, it may feel too small and too late and too quiet to feel like what we thought we needed. Notice I said what we thought we needed, because the truth is you can still heal. The truth is we can still heal even if accounting never comes. There's a story in Genesis chapter 16 about a woman named Hagar. She was used by a household that had power for her. And when she was discarded later by that same household, she was in the wilderness alone. And what the text tells us is God met her there. Not in Abraham's tent, and not after Sarah apologized, and not after Abraham was held accountable. Because as far as we see in the text, none of those things ever happened. What it gives us, though, is this: God saw her, and God called her by name in the wilderness. And Hagar gave God a name back, El Roi, the God who sees. Her healing did not wait for Abraham and Sarah's repentance. Her dignity did not wait for Sarah's and Abraham's apology. The God who saw her did not wait for the household to do the right thing before showing up in her life. That's the pattern. You don't need your abuser to fall for you to rise up. We don't need the institution to be honest for us to be free. We don't need the truth to come out in this lifetime for the truth to come out in ours. The truth has already come out in our lifetime. We know what happened. Your body knows and your story knows. And the God who sees, El Roi, sees you still in the wilderness and still knows your name. So, here's what I want us to do this week. One small thing for your healing that has nothing to do with your abuser, whether that's clergy abuse, whether that's spousal abuse, whether that's something else. One small thing to do for your healing. Go. One therapy session. One meditative walk. One conversation with someone who is safe that you can trust. One paragraph written in a journal. One prayer that's not about your abuser at all, but it's just about you in front of El Roi, a God who sees. Because this one small thing, is the start of our healing, and it does not depend on the accountability of an abuser. Cut the string, reclaim the hours, start to do things to bring about your healing, and begin to rise again. Because the abuser, whoever they are, has already had too much of your life. Do the one small thing and start to rise and heal again.